Hi, welcome to our March Out of the Trenches for the Realcomm Advisory. My name is Chris Saw with TechFac, and I have with me Joe Rich, who's the Chief Information Officer for Tishman Speyer, and Tom Taddeo, who's the Chief Information Officer for Kimco Realty. And they're both serving as our co-chair advisories for the 2016 Realcomm conference this year out in Silicon Valley in June. Thanks, guys, for joining me today and for being a part of this interview. This is our first video out of the trenches, so we're pretty excited about that. Um,
Thank you,
Tom and
Chris.
Joe are both up in New York at the Tishman offices, and I'm down here in DC at our TechFac offices, and we're using Skype for recording this. Um, so let's start off, guys. We've had a lot of offline conversations about this, but let's start with in this year 2016 in terms of your organizations in specifically and in terms of the industry in general, where are you seeing technology leaders focus their time and attention in 2016? What do you think the priorities are within our industry? Joe, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll start. I would say what I see kind of pervasive across not only our firm, not only the real estate industry, but business as a whole is the race, I'll call it the race to the cloud. We've been seeing cloud adoption with application as a service over the last really 10 years, but there's really a lot more um, adoption of public cloud for infrastructure as a service, for not only continued use of application as a service, but also platform as a service for things like SQL and development platforms as well. We were looking at all of those platforms and all of those options to not only provide scale, but also to allow us lower cost and a lot more flexibility for our business. So we're cautiously optimistic. We're doing bits and pieces. We have many proofs of concept in play right now, and we'll be moving certainly to the cloud between this year and next. It's not a matter. I think the big change this year. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
And I would agree. I'm hearing that same thing, and seeing it in the number of our clients. What do you think is the driver for that? Do you think that the reliability now has just been there? A couple of years ago, Office 365 would have intermittent outages and so forth. Do you think that it's there's now a proven reliability track record? Do you think that the cost models have properly been refined? What would you say is the driver that's why it's reached critical mass at this point in time?
I think it's a couple of things that are kind of coming together. Um, First, really only the biggest organizations have the ability to deal with the changes in cybersecurity and how to secure those systems down and how to deal with the changing landscape of regulations around client data on them. Only the largest firms can really keep on top of that properly. And in our industry, where firms are medium to smaller size, it becomes even more important. Also, I think Amazon's been very aggressive in number one, their pricing, and number two, their service offerings. They offer a lot more services than they had even 12 months ago for their clients at a much more reasonable cost than their clients could ever do on their own in terms of disaster recovery, backup, those kinds of activities, and it's getting to the point where you can't compete internally or externally. I think also the security of the public cloud has gotten a lot more mature over the last 3 to 5 years, and it's to the point where even more conservative firms can't ignore it at this point.
Yeah, I would agree. Would agree. Tom, how about you? What are you seeing as kind of focus and trend for 2016?
Well, there's no question, to Joe's point, that cloud is a major focus area for most real estate companies, ours included. I also think that as you look to adopting cloud models, you also want to be thinking about cyber and not just the cloud models being the driver here, but just trying to protect your assets, whether they're physical operational assets. It's a major focus area. You must consider that as a part of your control environment. So we're seeing a lot of work in that area. I also think that as people's infrastructures have aged over time, people are taking a look at them and saying, what investments do I need to make across my organization? And also, how does that apply to when we look at a cloud, adopting a cloud model? So infrastructure investments as well as cybersecurity are major focus areas that we're seeing.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It seems like virtually everyone we talk to, of course, cybersecurity is way up on the list, and I think we've all seen, I think you could say a dramatic increase in activity just in the past 12 months, at least the people I've talked to that, and sometimes it's driven by the high-profile projects that people are working on, that firms are working on, and I think it's just part of the overall trend in general. But
Well, there's no question, Chris, that it's getting a lot of press at the board level. So as some of our public peers, audit committees, board of directors, they're certainly very interested in keeping the assets secure and making sure the companies are making the right investments in that area. So I think that's very unique in terms of the evolution of computing and IT departments' interactions with board of directors and audit committees. It was previously very focused on systems and accounting and controls. Now you're really starting to see the introduction of cyber controls as an area of focus for that.
mm-hmm.
And so that's raising the awareness across the organization, across the enterprise.
Right, and also cyber crime and vulnerabilities and viruses and attacks have really ramped up and gotten really everybody's attention over the last 2 years especially. And I think people are asking, well, have we plateaued? Is it getting better? Unfortunately, it's getting worse, if anything. And I think a statistic we heard recently was that there's more money was made under cybercrime last year than the entire drug trade. So cybercrime is actually more profitable than drugs, and it's a lot cleaner. So there's a lot more people doing it. It's a lot easier to do. And on the law enforcement side, it's 100 or 1,000 times more difficult to actually enforce. And the resources aren't focused on enforcing cybercrime. They don't know. A lot of them don't even know how. And the ones that do are overwhelmed.
Yeah. It's that's an excellent quote about in reference to the drug trade. It's really hard to believe. I'm reminded of an incident that I became aware of where a company was doing a VoIP pilot, opened the pilot server up, opened the port up for public exposure on a Friday afternoon, so people could play in it over the weekend. And by Saturday evening, the port had been identified and exploited, and there was VoIP traffic from halfway around the world being run through that server and out to U.S. phone lines. It was that quick. And I think too, what we're seeing with the proliferation is many of us that figured we could fly under the radar screen because our organizations were small enough, or we didn't have that much personal information and so forth. There's nobody flying under the radar screen. We've seen pretty sophisticated phishing attacks and so forth against our small consulting company. So it's really amazing, frankly, the degree to the reach that the threats have. And as Jesse Carrillo brought up to me when he and I talked earlier this year, and obviously it relates to his firm Hines, and it relates to both of your companies, where there's a long-standing reputation of quality. Is reputation risk is a big issue. Not only your information, but you don't want the reputation of the firm tarnished by an intrusion, and by a threat.
Yeah, certainly reputation, but what we're going to start seeing, and we are starting to see, even we'll start to see within our own industry, is real economic loss. And that's really where that's really going to change things, because reputation loss, it starts to become a fuzzy thing, right? Especially when you're trying to do a return on investment on that. But you start seeing real economic loss, and the average loss for a cyber breach is what, like $4 million a piece. So you start being able to justify things. But, I don't want to be part of the doom and gloom. I would say I'm personally more optimistic than I have been, because all of this is raising awareness, and that's really what it's about. It's not only raising awareness with our boards, our audit committees, it's also all of our employees and the employees of every firm around the business world. And that's really what's going to help combat this. And we've got to be in a position where we have regular training, where we have regular policies and procedures that are updated, communicated out, and really become pervasive throughout all of our organizations. And I think that's been part of the major change over the last year and a half. Everybody's kind of like grasping at straws over what do I do? What do I do? I can't run and hide. I can't disconnect from the internet, otherwise I'll be out of business. So I have to do something. And that something is becoming a little bit more concrete than it was, I think, 18 months ago.
Good point. That's an excellent point. Um, I'd like to talk for a minute about, an area that people often talk about within IT in general, and certainly within commercial real estate, is, the 21st century technologist, the 21st century IT team that's delivering services, and how that's morphing. So we've just talked about, two trends that are really emerging in the 21st century: cloud technology, cybersecurity, and in general, we are seeing, the role of IT changing. How are you coaching your teams when you're recruiting? What kind of skill sets are you looking for? How do you see the 21st century IT team being different, and how are you developing your people, and what kind of competencies are you looking for currently based on the shifting expectations that there are of IT? Tom, I see you nodding your head.
Sure. Well, it's very relevant because you start to think about your customer and who that is, and it used to be the internal stakeholders within the organization. And while it still is, and traditionally a lot of it was accounting focused and so forth with the larger ERP systems, but it's a much broader audience of user for us. It's not only internal stakeholders, but it's also our tenants, right? They are now becoming a focus of our company. And how do we come up with ways of interacting with our tenants in a more effective way? So what you're seeing now is large-scale adoption of social technologies, and the people that we're looking for in our organization, it's more on the business analyst side. So we're looking at how do we partner with the various departments, and how do we really extend initiatives across a number of focus areas for the organization, not just a single department. So it's becoming a much broader reach for IT. IT and technology become a part of almost every business activity that the company is involved with. So we're seeing a much different type of almost a consultant type of role that we play within IT, and we start to align with our business functions as opposed to individual departments. And I would say that being able to go out and engage with our tenants, in our case we're retail shopping center owners, so engaging with not only our tenants but also with the people that are coming to our shopping centers. And that's a very different skill set, a very different type of technology that you want to be looking at as opposed to what we've traditionally done in the past.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, to add to that, I should say, the real estate's not a technology business, but every business is has technology in it, right? So what we find, we're looking for more generalists. We're not looking for technology experts that I may have looked for with a very specific skill set like a SharePoint architect or an Exchange engineer thinking after 5, 10 years ago. We're looking for much more generalists that can actually adapt. They're articulate, they're smart, they can figure things out. I think that's really important, that they can have a base understanding of technology and then just really broadly speak to the business. And that's really important, because you can't speak to the business in techno babble, check right out. That's it.
Yeah.
And I think, Joe, to that point, it's about managing relationships now much more, both internally and externally. And technology is still important, but as you see us adopting cloud models, we're leaving that technology and that expertise really to the folks that can deliver it best. And then how do we focus on improving and optimizing our own organizations? And that's the skill set you're looking for within the companies. Where can we pick up efficiencies? Where can we pick up cost savings, as opposed to how do I implement a piece of technology, or how do I set up a workstation or a mobile device, right? So,
Well, don't you think part of the driver for that is the fact that the number of areas where we need technical competencies these days compared to 15 years ago, right? Um, a small to mid-sized shop can't have that much competency in house. Like you say, Joe, you can't have a SQL guy and a SharePoint gal and all these areas, which is also feeding the outsourcing and moving to the cloud. It's like I can't keep all these servers running the way I want to and configured and so forth. I'm going to outsource that. I'm going to have the business-facing people in-house to feed that, to take the requirements of the business and then send it out to the vendor that can do it the best.
Yeah, and I think that's the most efficient way, and trying to outsource that particular function of business analysis is very, very difficult. It's tough for someone to come in that doesn't understand your business to walk in and then speak to your business people and translate the technology. Very, very challenging to outsource that particular role.
Yeah. Well, to wrap up, there's a lot of other topics we could discuss, but in the interest of time, I just want to look ahead to Realcomm, and given that you two are the co-chairs of the advisory council, what would you like to see the outcome be from this year's conference? What issues would you like to see tackled? What takeaways would you hope that the attendees would have this year?
Well, I think really the two topics that we had spoken about earlier, in terms of cloud, and really excited about being in Silicon Valley and San Jose this year. It's really the heartbeat of the tech industry, and the merging. It really ties in what Realcomm is tying in the real estate industry to technology. I'm always inspired by things that I learn about really all these topics, what the vendors have bringing to the table, and what the newer vendors, rather than what I'm seeing in the NCAA tournament, the blue bloods, we'll call it now the startups or the Cinderellas of the real estate industry, to keep it March Madness theme.
and I think from my perspective, it's the networking opportunities and the lessons learned. If people can get engaged with their peers and hear about experiences, or hear about projects that they've either worked on or are in the process of working on, that exchange of ideas and lessons learned is invaluable to people that are attending the conference. I also think Joe's point around the vendors and being able to meet the vendors and spend some time talking about your business problems. Come with your business problems to the conference so that you can work through, whether it's peers within the group that is attending or vendors that are on the floor. And that's really important. Spend time networking with folks, walking around, seeing different products and how people use technology. We've got a whole host of people that are doing analytic work and that are doing warehousing, data warehousing and analysis work. So these are technologies that by all means, people should be thinking about how can I take those and make my organization more efficient or get information in people's hands in another way than the way they've traditionally done it in the past.
Agree. Well, great. Gentlemen, thank you both. Joe Rich, CIO of Tishman Speyer, and Tom Taddeo, CIO of Kimco Realty. Guys, thanks for all that you give to the industry, and thanks for being co-chairs this year. And thanks for taking the time out for this interview. And if you're watching this out of the trenches and you'd like to go deeper on these topics, Realcomm again is the 21st through the 24th of June in Silicon Valley, and you can register now on the website. Thanks for joining us today for Out of the Trenches.